This is BBC Television.
Welcome to BBC Television Centre and the 60th anniversary of its formal opening on the 29th of June 1960.
This programme celebrates the anniversary with a look at the origins and design of the building and what it meant to BBC staff and viewers in the 1960s and beyond.
Hello, my name's Robert Seater and I'm head of BBC History. And my role is to tell the story of the corporation, which I take to mean why the BBC matters and how it's touched people's lives and made a difference. And there is no more distinctive a way than telling our story than through our buildings. And no more distinctive a building and adored a building than Television Centre.
My name is Roger Bunce. I started working at TV Centre in 1965 as a trainee cameraman and stayed a studio-based cameraman until 2001 when I left the staff, but I then carried on for another 10 years as a freelance cameraman, frequently working at Television Centre. And the building has just always fascinated me. It's a delightful piece of architecture. It was wonderfully efficient in its function, and I just love it.
Walking into Television Centre, you knew you were walking into A, an iconic building, and B, a building that was literally buzzing with television.
Ready to drown. I'm gonna beat up the town tonight.
This archive footage is from the first programme to be broadcast from the new Television Centre.
So the real trigger for the creation of Television Centre, this new centre, was the end of the lease of Alexandra Palace. Alexandra Palace, of course, was where television began in 1936, and it was never purpose-built for television. It was adapted. It was a sort of Victorian pile on top of a hill in North London. So by the time we get to the 50s, it's clear that the BBC needs to have a proper purpose-built area that they can dedicate to this new medium of television. So they scan the areas available to them and they alight upon White City. White City's got a rather interesting history because it was created and given its name, in fact, by the 1908 Franco-British exhibition, which built a panoply of pavilions and exhibition tents to showcase British and French culture, enterprise and creativity. And these white stucco buildings were left after the exhibition and they gave the name to the place White City. It was also incidentally the home of the 1908 Olympics and the 1948 Olympics. But by the time you get to the late 40s, the 50s, the area is really abandoned, and so the BBC alights upon it for the place to build the new Television Centre. And they set about finding an architect. And they give the commission to an architect called Graham Dorburn, who is apparently, he was given a doorstep of a brief in classic BBC commissioning style, and he goes off to the pub and sits there and scratches his head and wonders how on earth he's going to build this new building for this new medium television. And he doodles on the back of an envelope a question mark, and then realizes in a eureka moment that he has found the perfect shape for Television Centre. So it'll have a circuit in the middle for offices and managerial people, and round the back it will have a panoply of different access points for all the paraphernalia of television. The cameramen, the engineers, the scenery builders, the painters, the costumes, the talent. They can all access the building clearly and easily through the back. So that becomes the blueprint, the model for television centres all around the globe. So construction begins in 1951 to Graham Dorburn's blueprint design, and 1956 the foundation stone is laid, which is still there, and up the building rises the iconic shape of Television Centre. And it is self-consciously an industrial building. That's the ethos, the practicality, the function. It's all about creating a building that will work for television. Far, far away from the Victorian dreams of Alexandra Palace. This is a building that will function. And in the words of the then director of television, it will create a factory capable of producing 1,500 black and white programmes in a year.
Suddenly you have a building that was incredibly efficient at making TV programs. A lot of the magic lay in the ring roads around the back, which the average punter won't have seen. But there were two consecutive ring roads, an inside one and an outside overtaking lane, as it were. And these were used to bring scenery and technical equipment into the backs of the studios. The inner one served as a scene dock as well, while scenery was awaiting to come in. And at the front of the building, you had where the actors, the artists, the performers came from. The dressing rooms were all colour-coded. They related to 3 assembly areas, which were named after the primary colours of colour television. And each one of those fed into 3 possible studios. And so the actors came from their dressing rooms into the assembly areas. Then when they entered the studios, the first places they got to were makeup and wardrobe, where they were prepared. So by the time they arrived on the studio floor, they were ready to go. And the whole thing just functioned, the dynamics of the whole building just flowed so efficiently.
My first memory of Television Centre was actually when I was very young. I was given the Ladybird book of television, and inside it showed how all the studios worked, what cameras there would be in there, how you made a drama, those sort of things. And if you open the book, on the inside cover was a map of Television Centre. And I studied that map. I knew that map better than I knew the inside of my house.
Television Centre is famous for its circular core, known as the donut, but it's also celebrated for its aesthetic additions.
One of the things that often fascinates people about the building is the artworks. And there are a couple I'm going to talk about, but it's much like Broadcasting House. The commissioners of Broadcasting House in 1932 wanted to capture the magic of radio, and so they commissioned Eric Gill to make his famous sculptures on the front facade of the building. So similarly with Television Centre, how do we personify this magic of television? So they commissioned a sculptor called T.B. Huxley Jones to create the famous Yas Statue, which sits on a pillar right in the middle of Television Centre, in the middle of the donut. And it's an image of the sun god from Greek mythology, who was thought to capture this vital force of television. And there he is, he's holding the sun in his 2 hands, circular in form, much like the form of the building, and twisted to welcome the visitor in. And at his base, there are 2 further sculptures, recumbent, that represent sound and vision. So the sculpture says, this will combine everything. All the senses will be there for your delight. Unfortunately, there was one distraction about the sculpture, which was the fountains. So because of the acoustic of the building, whenever the fountains played, all the BBC staff ran to the toilets, so they had to be switched off. So that's one commission, the first one that strikes you as you enter the building. The second one is when you went into the main foyer, what was then the main foyer of Television Centre, you would see in front of you on the wall a fantastic, brightly coloured mural by John Piper, the English romantic artist who became an abstract artist during the war years. And he captures in this brilliant mosaic made of Venetian glass the vision of a cityscape, which is in an abstract form, which I think is saying that television is part of this bustling modernity. Television is part of how we live now.
I love the mosaics. The John Piper mosaic in the main reception area is gorgeous. I've no idea what it's meant to be. It's an abstract, but it seems to radiate colour television. And it can't have done because TV was black and white when that was put there, but the very fact that it's a mosaic, so it's effectively made of pixels rather like a colour television picture, it just says television. It's magic. And the fountains and sadly the fountains is one bit that never really worked because they leaked and could only be turned on occasionally, but when they were turned on, they were magic. The fountains played inwards, and then you had a hollow cylindrical waterfall that fell down between the statues of sound and vision. Well, the sort of basin they were in looked like the flying saucer from Forbidden Planet, if you've ever seen that film. It reflects the sort of pictures you see in the science fiction comics and science fiction films of the time, because it was a vision of the future. It was a vision of modernity. And I've said before, if Dan Dare or Jet Morgan had a headquarters, I'm almost certain it would look exactly like Television Centre.
So finally we arrive at the grand opening night, 29th of June 1960, and anybody who is anybody in television is there. Hosted in by the then Director General, Hugh Carton Green, brother of the writer Graham Greene. And actually, if you look at the programming, the live programming that was performed on that opening night, you can see it's a democratic attempt to have something for everybody available, and also to point backwards to the origins of television and forwards to what television might be. So you have the World War II entertainer, Arthur Askey. You have Mr. Pastry, delighting children with his mimetic capers. You have song and dance, the George Mitchell singers, the television toppers, and let's throw in a bit of ballet and classical music, and even a tightrope walker as well. So it is television for everybody. Everybody will find something to delight them. It's very, very democratic. And actually, also, I looked at the written archives when I was preparing this, and there's a lot of very detailed memoranda about the costs, it being the BBC. So the dinner particularly is very carefully budgeted. A nice dinner with a nice glass of wine, but not champagne. Licence fee payers will be glad to hear. And the price per head must be capped at £2.10. So a bargain, I'm sure. So that's the opening night. And then a year later, in 1961, the Queen visits and gives the building her royal seal of approval. And she's the young, glamorous Queen. So it's a big moment of post-war glamour after the austerity of the 1940s and the war years. And interestingly, the Queen visits not just the studios, not just in front of the camera. She goes to the scenery dock. She goes to costume and makeup. She does a thorough 100% visit of the new television centre.
A 17-year-old new recruit to BBC Radio took the opportunity to visit Television Centre and look around.
And I walked in through the doors and up to main reception. And I spent the rest of the day exploring the whole building. And I looked absolutely everywhere I was allowed to and I could get into the studios that weren't actually operational at the time or didn't have their red transmission lights flashing. And I had a look at absolutely everything. And I thought, this place is incredible. This building is unbelievable.
At TV Centre, I primarily remember doing situation comedies. There were things like Not in Front of the Children and Marriage Lines. Television Centre wasn't just a building, it was also a community of people, and you had a huge assemblage of talent from all the different crafts, from design, from lighting, from production, and a whole range of different production styles, comedy, drama, science fiction, light entertainment, sort of singing and dancing shows. And the thing, I doubt that there's really been such an assemblage of talent anywhere outside Hollywood, really. And they all met and they all talked to each other in places like the club particularly, but also in the canteens and in the tea bars. And if you had an idea for a program, for example, and you thought a set like this would look good, I wonder if you could actually build it and if it would stand up. Oh, there's designers over there. I'll go and talk to a designer. And you could pick each other's brains. You could throw ideas at each other and get ideas coming back. And so I think particularly the club, because there's a bit of alcohol sloshing around as well there, people would talk uninhibited and they'd come up with it. Yes, as I said, the studios were the program making factory, but the club was in many ways the ideas factory.
The idea that I might get a job in Television Centre was so huge and so extraordinary. I went for an audition for Children's BBC in TV Centre, met a guy called Pat Hubbard, who then took me round to the Pres suite, and I walked past both of the continuity booths and then to the Pres studios at the end and did my audition. And little did I know, I could have absolutely no idea that I was going to get the job. And I did. And I found myself working in the building that I'd studied, this perfect TV building. And what's more, we were not much after that, when I did Saturday morning telly, we were using all sorts of bits of it outside, behind the scenes, that sort of thing. It was absolutely perfect for me. It was one of those things. I always think studios have got a smell, and the smell in any of the TV studios in Television Centre is always, and it's a mixture of adrenaline and fear, I think, but also a bit electrical, a bit paint, a bit of wood. And I just even love the smell of the studios.
Everything worked so fast. When it was at peak efficiency, you could have a program in a studio for a whole day, 12-hour day, say. But overnight, all that scenery would be struck out, a whole load of new scenery would be struck in, it would be relit, it would be repainted. And then first thing the following morning, you were ready to go in and make a completely new program. It was like a Formula One pit stop is the only thing I can compare it to, the speed at which it worked. And there's a buzz and an energy that comes from working at that speed. You feel inspired, you feel excited. And again, the frontal architecture was also inspirational. It made you feel, you were part of something really modern and futuristic and exciting.
British television really is personified by Television Centre. Right from the swinging 60s with the social satire boom and pop music, through the shiny floor shows, entertainment shows of the 70s, the advent of news, bringing a sense of gravitas into the building, to children's entertainment. Everything happens at Television Centre. And when you talk to people who work there, what they all say is that the delight of the place was that you would walk around the roundel and you would see in studio after studio a different genre of activity. Everything that happened in television all came together in that powerful place. And not just within the industry itself, the building actually had a manifest expression on television. People saw it actually in their living rooms. They felt it was part of their lives. So particularly for children, actually, the Blue Peter Garden was famously there. And this was for, if you didn't have a garden yourself, well, you had a garden in Television Centre. Also, people would recall the big celebratory entertainment moments. So the famous moment when Roy Castle tap danced his way all around the donut and breaking records for all-star record breakers in 1977. Or on a darker note, when it was struck by a bomb by the RA in 2001.
Summing up the building is actually really easy because it is purposely built. Sarah Green and I used to joke and say that it was the fun factory. You could walk in August and there'd be fake snow blowing around the floor because someone was recording their Christmas special. And you never knew who you were going to bump into. You would go round the ring road and the TARDIS would be brought out, or the set for Generation Game, or the Past the Stars. The place was full of stars, 8 studios all working. Each one of those studios, the perfect size for the show that was going in it, all set about that circle, or semicircle for the studios. And I just always thought there is no other building, no other TV building that I've been into that is as perfectly built as that one.
I see Television Centre as a sort of living, dynamic work of art. The architecture is wonderful, but also the function was wonderful, the throughput, the way people moved through it, the way it inspired the people who worked there, the way it enabled people who worked there to be inspired, the speed it got us working at. And it just is a lovely piece of architecture, and the public got to know it because it appeared in so many programs. And so, yes, I think we should celebrate Television Centre. We should remember the role it played in getting television really started in all those early programs.
We knew that This Morning was coming out of the London studios. We knew that they were going to be shut down. We thought originally they were going to be renovated. And then it became quite clear that we weren't going to go back. And there was quite a few discussions as to where we would end up going. They were doing up the Riverside studios. There were sort of 2 or 3 other places. And then one day, the head of daytime said, "Yeah, we've got our home." I said, "Oh, okay, where are we going?" She said, "Television Centre." You are joking me, really? I'd been to the final BBC show. I was a guest on it with Ronnie Barker and Brucey and Noel Edmonds, and we were all on this show, which was Goodbye Television Centre. And so I'd made sure that I said to the producer on that last ever show, is it okay if they don't like you disappearing as a presenter if they don't know where you are? So I said, is it okay if I, for an hour, I just have a wander around? He said, yeah, sure, that's fine. So for an hour, I revisited all the steps I'd visited when I was 17. I went through all the studios, which are all empty, and had a good look round as a sort of goodbye to the place. I thought, that's it. What are they going to do? They're going to pull it down. I knew they were going to make it residential. What's going to happen to it? And then when I was told that this morning was going to be housed in TC3, I could not believe my ears. And so the thought, it's like such a perfect full circle. The thought of working there again, going back, was sublime.
And if we look right back to the press of the day in 1960, the Manchester Evening Chronicle said, "What Hollywood is to the film industry, the new television centre in London will become to television." And I think they were right.
Oh, that's nice and cool after the heat of the studio, eh?
Wonderful, isn't it? It was hot. Weren't we lucky to get out of the finale?
I'll say we were.
Yes.
How do you think the show went, David?
Oh, I think it went very well, didn't it?
I think so, yeah. Who do you think stood out a mile in the whole show?
Oh, there's no doubt about it.
Well, you think the same as I do?
I'm sure I do.
Of course. Mr. Pastry!
Oh, God.
God old Vicky!
If you'd like to learn more about the history of Television Centre, please follow the link to the RTS website for a list of resources.
And so ends our first programme from the new Television Centre.